What is up, everybody? Welcome back to the TDR Show. I'm back. We're talking Dynasty Deep Dive today. We're looking at Dynasty stashes. Jay is not here today. He is on the IR, but he will be back next week. So I'm going to be doing this solo. We're going to go through 10 players that I think you should be stashing on your Dynasty rosters now that the offseason is among us. And we're going to be talking about what is a stash, because those things are a lot different depending on the league you're in. How do we value stashes? How do we identify stashes? What can they be? So if you like that, if you like Dynasty, if you like stashes, hang out after the intro. All right. So first off, what's a stash, right? So I try to identify this. Now, everybody's going to have their different interpretation of what a stash is. I try to identify it 5 different ways. So first one is a high potential stash, right? So for me, this is a guy, and when we kind of did the notes, he has all the tools. He's got a good college profile. So we liked the college profile when he came out. He just hasn't gotten an opportunity yet, right? So like that, it's like, hey, that can be also opportunity stash too. So a lot of these things intermix. But for me, high potential is like, hey, has great draft capital. We love it. Potential to be fantasy relevant if there's a situation change. Like we think that he can be at least a wide receiver 2, at least a running back 2, at least a QB 2, maybe a high end QB 2, right? Or a tight end 1. That's kind of how I categorize that. Like a guy that really could come out of his shell, right? Kyron Williams, for example, is a great example of that after his rookie year of a high potential stash based on what he had ahead of him. Now, I don't think there's a lot of high potential stashes out there, and they're going to intermix these 10 guys I'm going to go through. I'm going to talk to you about like, I would put him at this category, but that doesn't mean he can't be high potential either. But this is like the one that you really, the unicorn, I think. I think the high potential stash, a lot of unicorns. We chase those unicorns. We get in trouble sometimes chasing unicorns. We're going to talk about a guy that a lot of people are probably going to think is a high potential stash today, but maybe a lot of people say, hey, we're going to sell high, right? So we're going to get into that. The next one is limited production stash. That's pretty simple. Hey, just hasn't produced, but we do like his skill set. He just hasn't really been out there. Now, this could be different ways. So this could be he just didn't produce this year as a rookie, right? Like, hey, you're looking at rookies and just didn't have that opportunity either. But I expect him in the future to produce, or he produced a little bit. We saw some flashes in the pan, and we like what we saw from them. Injury stash. This is pretty simple. Either somebody in front of them is an injury prone player, and we're like, hey, he could be that running back too, right? If someone gets hurt in front of him, he has the volume. Or hey, maybe he got injured this year, and you're looking at it like, hey, he got injured this year, but people tend to forget about those injured players, or what can you do for me now type of fantasy, dynasty leagues are that, right? I think too many times we think dynasty leagues are not like, they're all 3 years out. Bull crap. You know how many leagues full. You know how many people just pay 1 year advance. Like it's redraft plus. I do think an injury stash away, you can get some value there, right? And also it depends on when you're at in the season. So like Dak Prescott was an injury stash, technically, right? We're not talking about deep dives. We are today, but like that's an injury stash, right? That's the guy you could flip there. But for this purposes, like a guy that we're gonna get a couple of guys that got injured this year who we think could have big roles moving forward. Opportunity stash, really that just either free agency or other reasons we think they're going to get on the field more, right? So you'd like to be concerned, really what you're looking for opportunity stash. Snap rate, did it go up throughout the season there? Expected fantasy points, was there something like, hey, we expected him to get these many fantasy points, for whatever reason they didn't, but they could get that opportunity to do in the future? And then the value stash, I think really it's just either we think this player, if we stash him now, will increase in value over the offseason, I can flip them, right? Just because we give you stashes today doesn't mean I think you should keep them on your roster. It just means if you get them now, you might be able to flip them for more later, right? Or at least get back what we have, right? Or maybe they are. Maybe we think, hey, they are value. I'm going to get them now because they're going to increase in value, but I'm going to keep them on my roster. You can look at it both ways, but that's kind of how we identify what our stashes are. Now, there can be all of the above, right? There can be a lot of guys in between these things, but let me know, if you're watching on YouTube, we appreciate you guys. What do you think in the comments? What are some stashes that you look for as you're kind of diving into it? All right, let's get into stashes. Now, how do we categorize these stashes? Essentially, I looked at the most highly valued players of the group, and we start with them, right? Now, we wanted to make sure the overall was 150 or below. So we're going deep dives here. So you might not agree with like where they were ranked, but this is where they were ranked on Keep Trade Cut. And this is kind of how they're getting ranked out there in terms of the market. So we just want to start there, and then we're going to work our way down to the deeper stashes as we go. And the first one on the board is Jalen Coker, right? So he's overall 159, wide receiver 57 out there. So again, he might not be a stash, like, oh yeah, of course he's on a roster, but you can still go trade for them, right? We're not talking about waiver wire stashes. We're just talking about guys you maybe can go acquire in 2-for-1 deals, or I put deals up there for you that you could see. But why do we like Jalen Coker? First of all, I categorize him as an opportunity stash, right? So when you think of the Panthers offense, it's improving. Like, you've seen a makeover here. You see Bryce Young looking pretty good now, and Jalen Coker has kind of emerged as kind of a contributor for them, right? So, he was an undrafted rookie out of Holy Cross, but big play threat. He's shown some ability on deep balls. You saw against the Cowboys at a big 83-yard touchdown run. I mean, he hit a 21.1 miles per hour there. That's the fastest play we've seen from the Panthers in 4 years. And, when you're looking at the roster and you're looking at kind of what they're building there, Terrace Marshall gone, Jonathan Mingo traded, Adam Thielen. I don't know what they're going to do with that contract in terms of like where his career is. You're looking at Coker. He could be the wide receiver too, right? I know Xavier Leggett's there. Thielen. We're looking at some other guys there. Jatavian Sanders has looked good at tight end. But if you're looking for like potential and opportunity, Coker's that guy, right? Even this last week, week 18, 7 receptions, 62 yards. So you're seeing kind of what he's been able to put out there. And he should have scored a touchdown. He got knocked at like the half-inch line. So, there's opportunity there. And when you look at it, he's still getting value at wide receiver 57. So you might say, oh, everybody knows about this kid, but maybe they don't. Maybe there is value. Maybe you're not in a deep dynasty league. And when you're looking at kind of what he's going for out there in terms of kind of trades, basically he's going for seconds in 26 and 27 class. Cole Kmet, which again, I've never been a Cole Kmet guy. So if you want to pivot off a tight end to Jalen Coker for that value, that upside, that opportunity, that there's potential there, right? Coker at a third for Dotavian Wicks. Again, I'm not a huge Wicks or Green Bay fan there, but if I can get a third back on that side, or even try for a second, I'd probably start there with the second. If I can get some type of off ramp, right? Kind of go get, okay, I'll take the 1-for-1 with Coker and Wicks, but if I can get a pick back in this class, especially if I need like a running back with how deep that running back class is, I would go there. Jerome Ford, Ben Sinnott, those guys I'm willing to give up to get Coker. I really am. I do think Coker has kind of, he's earned a spot on this roster. And I think moving forward, I think this coaching staff does like him. And we've seen, again, remember, when you're thinking of opportunity stashes, snap rates got up, expected fantasy points. We've seen his true fantasy points going up. So those are the things that you want to see from him, the targets that he's earned. So Coker, for me, is the number one player on this list for value-wise. Now, the next guy is probably going to shoot over him after his week this week, and that's Marvin Mims. So, Mims is one of those guys. It's funny because in our Discord that we have for our Patreon, someone talked about saying, it's essentially said like, hey, he's going to be the sucker bet of the year. And that's really where you get with some of these guys. Some guys fall in love with them, and then some are like, hey, he's a sucker, sell high. So it really depends. I mean, I want to know where you guys are at with Marvin Mims. When you're looking at him from a perspective of where he's getting valued right now, overall 170, wide receiver 63. I do think he'll bump up. Like I said, this last week, week 18, he did have 5 catches, 51 yards, and a touchdown. And now when you're looking at Marvin Mims from just a dynasty perspective or what he's put on the field, he's been a pretty integral part of Denver's passing attack. He's basically got about 50% of snaps back-to-back games, and this week over 50%. So you're looking at that. He had a couple 100-yard receiving outings in 2 of his last 5 games. He has those basically 4 touchdowns in that span too. He's been scoring points. So the question is, and we do this all the time, is what are we doing with Marvin Mims, right? Because when you're thinking of like that roster, Sutton is there, but hey, it's wide open, right? That wide receiver 2 for the Broncos is wide open. So if you think that he can be their wide receiver 2, and a lot of people did coming out of college, he was a very, very good college player at Oklahoma. As you guys know, we do a lot of college football stuff here. We have our Patreon for that. Like he was a very hot after top, asset in Devi when we were talking about him there. And when you're looking at him here, he could be there. Devon Vale has looked good. Sutton's there. But again, Troy Franklin really hasn't jumped up. Tight end wise, they're probably going to add to this. But from an opportunity perspective, if he's still getting valued around this range, he's not a bad stash there. Now, as far as trades going for him, and again, these are all 12-team Superflex tight end premium trades. Marvin Mims for a second, a 25 second. Marvin Mims for a 25 third. Mims and 25 second for Pitts. That's the interesting one because I really feel like I should be smashing Pitt's side there. But man, that guy, he just I talk about it in Discord all the time. I joke that he should play an Olympic sport because he probably win a gold in that. For right now in football, he's not producing where we need him to produce there. Mims and Dell for Josh Downs, excuse me. And then Marvin Mims in a second for Jameson Williams. I'm going to smash Jameson Williams on that side. But the other ones, I think, bring up an interesting case of where you can kind of pivot to Mims and then stash him. And if the opportunity comes, him and Bo Nix look like they have that kind of chemistry there. He should be able to, when we're thinking of opportunity stash, wide receiver 3 from a fantasy perspective, possibly, if they have that role for him moving forward. And that's what I think you're looking for when you're looking at stashes this deep, is that opportunity where, hey, I can plug him in on a flex if I need to, and he could be a wide receiver 3. And if he gives me more, great, right? But his floor is that wide receiver 3 range. But let me know, what do you guys think about Mims in terms of being a sleeper there? Now, as we go lower, again, as we kind of dive through all 10 of these guys, we're going to go the deeper we go here, right? So the third one is a running back. We're going to go Marshawn Lloyd. Now, this is one of those things with just been injured, right? So he's an injury stash for me because he just hasn't been out on the field. Now, when we're thinking of this, his rookie season been derailed by injuries, hip, hamstring, ankle. Then he was coming back and he's appendix burst. The poor guy has just not caught in a break here. But I do think in 2025, he has opportunity, right? When you're thinking of him. Now, he doesn't, he has a minimal snap count. We saw that. I think he's a bargain, right? I think he is a bargain. And he's a third-round pick. You have to remember that. Now, the question that we're always going to get is, okay, what about Emmanuel Wilson, right? Because Emmanuel Wilson's looked pretty good this year in terms of, what he's been able to produce on the field behind Josh Jacobs. But I think Wilson's going to get a contract next year somewhere. I think a team's going to look at Emmanuel Wilson and be like, hey, we're going to pay up for them. And I don't think Green Bay is going to do that because I think they drafted Marshawn Lloyd for that role. And I think he could do it. I just think he's been injured. So if you think that too, there might be some people that don't. There's going to be some people out there thinking Emmanuel Wilson's going to come back. And if that happens, yeah, I mean, there's always a risk when you think of that. But if it doesn't happen, you get Marshawn Lloyd in that running back 2 range for another year with Josh Jacobs on the tires, right? Not saying Josh Jacobs' tires are going to fall off, but that opportunity of him being a running back 2 with one ankle injury away from being a running back 1, that's not bad when he's sitting here at overall 186 and running back 49. I mean, if you look at this as Lloyd's on that field, and he gets a starting role ahead of Jacobs, if Jacobs is injured, he's a top 24 guy, right? That's return on your value. I'm okay with that. I feel like there's a clear path there where you're looking at a running back 2 on a depth chart. That's essentially what you seek in a stash, right? A Lee handcuff with standalone potential. He has that. He's a pass catcher. He can make guys miss. He's perfect for this offense. So again, he's an elite handcuff with standalone potential. That's what you're kind of looking for at the running back spot. When you look at those trades that he's gone for recently, Marshawn Lloyd for Jermaine Burton. I'm smashing Lloyd's side. I don't know what the hell's going on with Jermaine Burton. If you can get Jermaine Burton off your roster for any of this, I would definitely do that. Lloyd for Lucas Kroll in a third. Lloyd in a second for Jonnu Smith. Marshawn Lloyd for Kamani Vidal. Marshawn Lloyd for Christian Kirk. Marshawn Lloyd for Troy Franklin. The only deal here that I would maybe take a pause at a little bit is Christian Kirk. But when you think of Christian Kirk, what is that role going to be in that offense? Coming off the injury, new coaching staff, more than likely. And what does that entail? I do think Lloyd is a safer bet there from a floor perspective. So that's kind of our running back. That's the third player in terms of our dynasty stash here. Next guy that's valued there, we're going to tight end again. We're going Theo Johnson. So let's talk about the Giants tight end. Overall, 206 on Keep Trade Cut, tight end 24. Now, what do we see with Theo Johnson, right? So what do we think when we're talking about him this year? He might not have had a great year. He's out with the injury, right? So that's why he's an injury stash. You could also put limited production. You could put opportunity as well. So when you're thinking of what he's done this season, 43 targets on the year, 29 catches, 331 yards and a touchdown. But the one thing I really like to see, so over his last 5 games, when you're looking at how many, he had 27 targets. Over the last 5 games, he had 27 targets. He was getting opportunity there. Now, I understand moving forward what this offense could look like, especially with doesn't seem like they're going to get a new coaching staff. We'll see how that kind of plays out. Got to have a new quarterback possibly, right, with where they're picking. Who knows if they're going to fall outside that range in the rookie draft, but I know they're going to definitely go get a quarterback in that range. And then when you look at the roster, Malik Neighbors is going to be there. I like Wan'Dale Robinson. We probably could have put him out of stash if we really wanted to. But after that, who's their starting tight end? Daniel Bellinger is there, but Theo's better than Daniel Bellinger is. So you're looking at a guy who could have a quarterback now that can pepper him with targets, whoever they are. Could be Justin Fields, could be Kirk Cousins, maybe Darnold, right? Whoever, depending on where the free agency goes. Theo to me is an excellent grab right now, especially at a tight end position when you're looking at it. That it's just you just need guys to get targets, right? If you're going to go deeper at the tight end position, that's where you go. And when you're looking from a PPR standpoint, Theo Johnson wasn't terrible this year, right? When you think of finishes of like an 8, 19, 20, 18. So he's back in tight end too. But for a rookie on that Giants offense, that's not bad. So that's where you look at Theo Johnson being kind of a value. Now, as far as where he's going in trades, Theo Johnson for a third. If you really need a tight end, I don't mind giving up a third for that. Theo Johnson, Diggs for Juwan Jennings and a third. Again, not a bad deal on both sides there. I'd probably rather have the Theo Johnson and Stephon Diggs side. Theo Johnson for Britton Strange, Theo Johnson for Dalton Schultz, and Theo Johnson for Sean Tucker. Give me Theo Johnson probably in all of those. Sean Tucker is probably the one where you're looking at it like, hey, depending on what they could do with Rachaad White, what's going on. Bucky obviously is probably going to be their running back one. Maybe you want to stick with Sean, but those other two, I would definitely pivot off of that for Theo Johnson right now if I could get him. And I do think with a new quarterback, new offensive system, whatever they bring in, Theo is definitely a buy and definitely kind of a stash right now based on the market. And again, if you look at kind of the depth chart, that's what you have to do with the landscape of Dynasty is look forward and see, okay, how are these things going to play out? How, do we expect him to have more expected fantasy points next year, targets? And did he get some this year? Yeah. I mean, he was great this year on a really, really bad offense. Now, next wide receiver we're going to talk about is Parker Washington. So shout out Parker Washington because Parker Washington is playing pretty good these last few weeks. Obviously when you're thinking of him, coming out of Penn State, a lot of talk about what he could be this year, right? So when you're thinking of like what he was as a prospect last year, didn't really get on the field too much, but in 2024, he's kind of bounced back a little bit. 51 targets, so that's what you kind of want to see there. 32 receptions this year, but really has came on strong down the stretch of the season. So a lot of fun down the stretch of the season. So when you're looking at just, he had a game of 12 targets against Houston. You're thinking these last, basically these last 5 weeks, he's averaged essentially six targets, 5.6 targets a game. And he's been there. Now, this offense has been a mess. Mac Jones has been quarterback, but you can't just, throw that out, right? He's earned it. And he scored 3 touchdowns in that time frame too. So again, when you're thinking of like opportunity stash, the thing with Parker Washington, he's sitting here at wide receiver 78 on Keep Trade Cut, overall 211. And man, who's ahead of him on that depth chart, right? I do know they're going to be going through probably new change there. But man, who's there? I mean, we know Brian Thomas, obviously, yes. Okay. And then Etienne's going to be back, but what does that look like moving forward? We've seen kind of Evan Ingram. He's on the IR. Britton Strange is out there as well. But again, who's the wide receiver 2 on that team? The only thing you could say is Christian Kirk, who's on IR, but who knows what they're going to do with that contract and with him. They can move off of Christian Kirk, and now you're sitting there with Brian Thomas and Parker Washington there, who complement each other very well. Parker Washington has showed that he can be a red zone threat as well. Maybe you slip in Parker Washington here, right? He's very cheap. Wide receiver 78 is what we're looking at here. And when you're looking at some of the deals here, Washington a third for Christian Kirk, Washington for Cedric Tillman, Isaac Geronda, Parker Washington for Sean Tucker, Parker Washington for DeAndre Hopkins, and a third. I probably wouldn't move the third, but you might, right? If it's that far out and you think, hey, he has opportunity. But these other deals, yeah, where he's getting valued around, the guys that are going there with the opportunities, with Trevor Lawrence, what's not to like about Parker Washington? I do think that he's a value in that range, especially just when you look at the wide receiver position and we think of what Jacksonville can do. And if they bring in a very offensive-minded head coach, who knows who they're going to bring in there to be their head coach, based on the season. And that's positive. And then let's say for whatever reason they bring back Peterson. You've already seen Parker Washington kind of establish a relationship with the staff. So I don't think it's a lose-lose either way. I think if the staff comes back, great. If not, if it is a new staff, they're probably going to prioritize Parker Washington based on what he's been able to do on the field. And he's a good stash to have on your roster there. Now, the next value, guys, so we're going through the values here, is Roman Wilson. Man, Roman Wilson. So this is a incomplete grade. We're going to give Roman Wilson here. We gave him an injury stash out here for Pittsburgh. 213 overall, wide receiver 80 out there. And, the thing is with him, he's practicing now. He's been injured. Obviously, the ankle injury put him on there. He had the IR, and it just wasn't great, right? The coaching staff said, hey, just he's not going to get out here, all of those things. But here's the thing. He injured his ankle early in training camp, but man, he showed a lot of promise. He missed most of camp, most of preseason, but when he did the rookie mini camps, there was some buzz about this kid. And I've watched Roman Wilson play for a very long time as a Michigan fan. So I do know that he can create separation and he can earn catches in the slot. And if Roman Wilson was healthy, the Steelers would be utilizing him. I truly believe it. When you watch who the Steelers roll out there week in, week out at the wide receiver position, you realize they need Roman Wilson, right? Like they need a guy like that. They need that opportunity, that guy that can get in there, create separation, earn catches. I mean, Calvin Austin ain't doing it. Van Jefferson ain't doing it. None of those guys are doing it. Even George Pickens struggles. George Pickens though, Roman Wilson could help. The only thing that you have to worry about with Roman Wilson, if you are going to try to go acquire him for super cheap, by the way, is that they're going to probably look to the free agent market because they were hot in a lot of free agents last year trying to get some guys and in the draft. I know they've been, I know Luther Burden's been on the radar. I've seen Isaiah Bond if he comes out. I've seen Emeka Egbuka from Ohio State. I've seen a lot of guys getting mocked to the Steelers, and that's okay. I mean, when you think of how deep this kid is, he can still earn targets. And in PPR, all you need him to do is earn targets and get on the field. If he gets on the field, he's going to earn those because he is that good. He can do that, right? Now, he's not going to ever be a wide receiver 2, I don't think, but he can still earn targets and be out there. So Roman Wilson to me is definitely a stash here for this offense and what it looks like moving forward. When you think of deals out there, Wilson at third for Jacoby Myers, Roman Wilson basically for fourths. There's a couple fourths in here for 27, 25th round class. Roman Wilson for a third, Alec Pierce, Devon Vale. I like Roman Wilson in those ranges. Like that's a very good value if you can bet on him being healthy coming out of minicamp. This coaching staff does like him. Everything I read and all the reports, they've talked about him being kind of their guy in terms of why they, invested the capital they invested in him. Roman Wilson, to me, if he gets healthy out there, now it's all risk. All these guys are a risk, but it's a small risk for a guy that does have some opportunity ahead of him. Like even if they draft a receiver, I still think Roman Wilson can get out in that field. Now we're going to go back to the tight end position. We're going to talk about Eric All. Eric All is for the Bengals. This is a deep shot, though. Everybody out there, right? This is deep, deep, deep here. Now, he had an ACL and MCL, so he does have a torn ACL, MCL. He should be cheap, but he had some flashes, right? He was a 4th-round pick. He was a strong run blocker. They really liked his run blocking ability. What that tells me is that they want him out in that field, right? So if he gets out in that field, all bets are off from there. I'll take getting on the field. Like we talk, especially we're going this deep. He is tight end 27, overall 215 player on Keep Trade Cut. To me, when I'm thinking of Eric All, I'm like, hey, if he can get on the field because of his run blocking, and I know he can play receiver, right? I know he can catch. I'm okay with that. I'll take that, right? Now, you have Joe Burrow at quarterback. We love that. Now, it really comes down to what they're going to do with T. Higgins and Mike Gesicki. So if T. Higgins goes and then Mike Gesicki goes as well, they're tied in right now. Boom, opportunity right there for Eric All. I don't know what they're going to do. They have to pay a lot of people. They got to pay Chase. Even if they bring Higgins back, though, I'm not that worried about it because, hey, he's already been there. But if they move on from the tight end position and they think All could be ready to go by 2025, that's exciting because I think they've been looking for a guy like this for a long time. And you got to remember from an analytical perspective, again, remember we talk about profiles. He ranked high in targets per route run. He was tight end 2 in college football. Yards per route run, he was tight end 6 in college football last year. Those are things that you like to see, right? He was just injured. So when you think of Eric All is the type of guy that you want to get on your roster from a deep stash perspective and tight end premium. He's a tight end to go after. Now, it's a deep shot. I realize that, especially coming off the ACL, MCL, but he's probably free. I bet you he's in some way, I would imagine, in non-deep rosters out there, he's probably on waivers. You might be able to grab him off a waiver. And I think based on his talent, his opportunity, and his team, he's worth the shot to kind of get stashed on your roster there. Now, next guy is Malik Washington out here in Miami. Malik, wide receiver out of Miami, was getting a lot of buzz, man, earlier in the year. They thought maybe he could be their guy for them coming into the season, like maybe a kind of a deeper kind of play here. Hasn't really seen it. Didn't get a ton of production this year. Overall, 224 on Keep Trade Cut, wide receiver 83. But man, let me tell you, he's emerged a little bit, right? Jalen Waddle's been banged up. He was sidelined there. He sees some opportunities there. He kind of earned some targets. He showed that he belonged in the NFL a little bit. So Malik has showed that, like, hey, he can do it a little bit, right? He's still got a lot to learn. He was still a young rookie, especially when you're thinking of like just playing time in college. Like he showed he could produce last year in college, and he's still a smaller guy, 5'8", 191, but 26 catches, 223 yards, 36 targets. Those are things you like to see. At least he did something out there. He produced something. Now, I think the big thing for me is he's in a high-powered offense, so we like that, right? We got Tua there. And then the role situation is getting a little weird out there in Miami, right? I don't know. Tyreek Hill went off after the game here in week 18 saying like he wants to be on a different team. But that base salary is a lot. I don't know if they can move off a $30 million base salary there. But here's the thing. Malik Washington is already probably their wide receiver 3 on this roster. If Tyreek for some reason leaves or Jalen Waddle, who cannot stay healthy, Malik's there, right? So there is an opportunity on this depth chart to kind of earn this, especially with a head coach that likes his playmaker like Malik. Man, you might want to be in here, especially at wide receiver 83, like especially with his profile in college, all of the above. Like you have to like what he's been able to do at every level. And especially in this offense, he fits it. He fits it really well. I mean, people forget at last year in college, 1,400 yards and 9 touchdowns at Virginia. That's a hell of a profile. Right. So he could do this too. If he gets that opportunity, Malik is probably one of my go-to stashes here. A guy that I really think you should be out there targeting, especially just, hey, he has a high ceiling, low acquisition cost. That's what you like, right? Now, when you're thinking of what that acquisition cost is, Malik Washington for a 25 third, Malik Washington a third for James Conner, Malik Washington a fourth and Khalil Herbert. God, give me that. Give me Khalil Herbert off my damn roster, and all I have to do is flip-flop you force. Oh, I'll take Malik all day there. Trey Tucker, Jalen Tolbert, Michael Mayer, all getting traded straight up for him. Again, opportunity for those 3 guys is not as good as the opportunity for Malik Washington. I would take a shot on Malik Washington and stash him on your benches. And I think that's the right move here. I think that's a guy, when you're looking at the landscape of the Miami Dolphins, is a guy to kind of go out there and get. Next, guys, Will Shipley. We're going running backs to finish off the show here. The last 2 guys. It's very simple with Will Shipley. Running back 64, 260 here. We're not talking about a gangbuster here in terms of production this year, but there's one thing I like about Will Shipley. One, I've always kind of liked him as a prospect, right? Like, so maybe it's not one thing, it's 2 things. This year hasn't got a ton of run, but this last couple of weeks, against the Giants, he had 10 carries, 32 yards. Dallas, he had some, volume a little bit there. So he had some limited production there, but Kenneth Gainwell is set to become a free agent. So if Kenneth Gainwell goes somewhere else, which he possibly can, I do think he might get a contract from somebody out there. When you're thinking of Will Shipley, 4th round pick, so they did invest some capital into him. They probably looked at it and said Shipley could take over for Kenneth Gainwell when he's gone. And then, hey, everybody's backing up Saquon right now. We know Saquon Barkley is who he is, over 2,000 yards. But man, he's a great high-end handcuff with standalone value, right? If something was to happen to Saquon Barkley, Will Shipley, if Gainwell is gone, could be their running back 1. And at a guy going at running back 64 prices, you have to like that. I also think Shipley can catch passes, right? So from a Clemson standpoint, when he played at Clemson, from a receiving standpoint, he was very good. Not just swing passes. He can line up. He can do the gain roll. Now, we've seen what the game roll means. It's not amazing, especially with the tush push, especially with the guy that's in front of him. But consistency and can increase value. So if you think of a value riser, Will Shipley could be a value riser. You're telling me right now, if Saquon went down and Will Shipley was running back 1, he'd be ranked running back 64? No, he would jump up and probably into the 30s, right? Just based on sheer volume, expectations, and just value. So that's why when you think of like targeting Will Shipley and these guys, you do that. Now, what's he going for out there? Shipley in a third for Kendra Miller. If you want to get off the Kendra Miller experience, it might be time. This would be it. Shipley for Luke Schoonmaker, for Juwan Johnson, Antonio Gibson, Malik Willis, Cam Akers. Really the bottom of the barrel there in terms of the value. But a lot of those guys I'm looking to pivot off of anyway. If I can get a shot at Will Shipley sitting there, could be the running back 2 on this roster with the Eagles, I'll take that shot there. I think that he has that opportunity there. And the last guy, I'm going to keep pounding the table for this man, Rasheen Ali out here at Baltimore. Opportunity stash, really, right? So you think about that. Injuries have really sidelined him most of 2024, but he has talent there, and they have the heavy running scheme, right? And he's shown enough potential to be considered as running back 2. So I know Derrick Henry's a freaking manimal. Like, he's just never going to get hurt, and that's okay. Like, we don't want him getting hurt. But who's behind there? Justice Hill, Keaton Mitchell. And they did invest in Rasheen Ali, and I do think Ali could be their running back too. This is an opportunity stash, and this is like hey, I do think that he can sneak in there and be a very, very solid player for them. I really like Rasheen Ali, and of all the guys, he's getting value the least, right? Running back 81 and overall 331. That's where his value is. I had to scroll so deep on the websites to try to find him. I didn't think they went down that far. I had to try to keep looking for him. That's deep, and that's value right there. So when you think of that, like, and from just at Marshall last year, 1,000 yards, 200 yards receiving, right? 1,000 yards rushing, 200 yards receiving. He can do it. He's got the size. He's 5'11", 215, 220. The only thing you got to do is freaking stay healthy. And he slowly started staying healthy the last basically December into January. Hasn't got any volume. Didn't get any snaps, really. Kind of got a few. His best game was against the Giants. He had 8 carries and 32 yards. But, again, opportunity. Sitting at running back 2 behind Derrick Henry. Super cheap. This dude is the cheapest of them all. Man, there's a path, right? That's what we're looking for when we're talking about stashes here. Look for that path. And if that on-ramp is like looking good here, I can get him at a pretty cheap price, and he's sitting there maybe as their running back 2 heading into training camp. That's a value to me. I'll take that value all day. When you think of the deals he's going for, Rasheen Ali for Isaiah Davis, Rashid Ali for a 4th, Foster Monroe, Kamonte Turpin, Jacob Cowing, Jahan Dotson. Those are all deals I am willing to make to go grab Rasheen Ali for that opportunity cost of him being the running back 2 on the Ravens. Those are perfect examples of, people I'm moving off of to go get Ali to kind of give me my stash there. Now, final thoughts here in terms of the stashes that we're talking about. Again, it all is it dictates what your league thinks, right? And it's really how deep your benches are. Can you use taxis? I will say, if you can't use a taxi squad, I enjoy grabbing these guys because they're cheaper, right? And you can really kind of move off of them, and you might be able to get them on the waivers. Now, if they are on taxi squads, it might get a little tougher there. 2-for-1 deals, get them to throw in. Like, there's ways that you can be very, very creative with how to get these guys on your roster there. But I am excited about a lot of these prospects. Like, I do think that they have their opportunity to really kind of show out. Now, not all of them are going to hit. That's impossible. I'm not going to get on here like some people do and talk about you must draft these guys or get these guys on your roster because they're going to win you leagues. No, our whole goal here is to win value, right? And if you could plug and play him in your flex. Jalen Coker, can you play him in your flex? You might be able to next year. Marvin Mims probably will be a flex option. Marshawn Lloyd, if there's an injury there, yes. Or we're looking at running backs who possibly, like Lloyd, could be a flex option pass-catching running back as that 3rd down guy. Okay, I will take that, right? And then you're looking at some of the tight ends. Eric Hall, very, take a shot at the dark there. Theo Johnson, I think he has a very, very solid opportunity to kind of come into his own as a solid tight end 1 on the Giants, but also as maybe the wide receiver 3 target getter on that team as well with a new quarterback. That's exciting here, right? Now, always pivot, always doing these things. As we get into the offseason, churn those rosters, baby. Look at right now. Go through it. Go take a look at kind of like the free agents that are coming up. Who's going to get moved off? What are those roster cloggers sitting at the back end of your roster that you can kind of churn. And one thing that I like to do, especially right now, is churn. And I don't mind going after kind of the younger running backs who could be the running back 2s and 3s and churning those wide receiver 7s and 8s I have on my roster. If they're rostered, if they're on a NFL roster at the running back position, I don't mind taking shots on them. I can get a lot of wide receivers, but some of these running backs do have value. That's why I'm thinking like Shipley and Ali, who are really late here, are getting value. The least out of all these guys are definitely must-go targets, and go grab them just to have potential value risers on your roster here. So I appreciate you guys tuning in. I know listening to me the whole time is not fun all the time. Jay will be back next week, hopefully get off the IR, and we wish Jay all the best. We appreciate you guys here at the channel. Hit that like and subscribe button. If you're on YouTube, we appreciate you. Drop it in a comment. What do you think? Who are some stashes out there you like? What are some trades you like? Drop them in there. I'll talk to you about them. I appreciate you guys. I'll check you guys on the next show.